know the song, that dreamy, chiming intro, the echo of a voice that sounds like both rebellion and romance. But behind Manic Monday, behind the flawless harmonies and dazzling videos, was a band of women fighting not just for airplay, but for autonomy, equality, and respect. The Bangles weren't just another girl group molded by the industry. They were musicians, songwriters, dreamers with grit. But how did four women from Los Angeles take on the boys' club of rock and win the world over, only to walk away at the height of their fame? Why did critics pit them against each other? And what did it cost them to come back again years later with their legacy still intact? This is the untold story of the Bangles, a journey filled with shimmering highs, painful setbacks, and a harmony that could only be born from true sisterhood. If you love uncovering the real stories behind the voices that shaped music history, hit that subscribe button and join us here on Retro Waves, where legends live on. In the warm glow of late 1970s California, a quiet revolution was brewing. Not in stadiums or record labels, but in garages, living rooms, and coffee shops where music wasn't just background noise. It was salvation. Two sisters, Vicky and Debbie Peterson, were at the center of this budding creative storm. Raised in the San Fernando Valley, they were surrounded by the classic sounds of the Beatles, the Byrds, and Simon and Garfunkel, music that felt rich, raw, and filled with color. Their parents supported their love of music, but this wasn't just a phase, it was purpose. Vicky, the elder by 2 years, found herself lost in melody, often dissecting guitar riffs on her own, drawn to the idea of storytelling through strings. Debbie, fiery and bold, gravitated to the drums, a surprise for a young girl at the time. She was powerful and precise, her rhythms cutting through any room. Meanwhile, not far away in the L.A. suburbs, Susanna Hoffs was growing up in a house filled with books, art, and eccentric energy. Her mother, a film director, encouraged self-expression. Her father, a psychoanalyst, taught her how to ask big questions. As a teenager, Susanna devoured British rock and soaked in the theatrical flair of artists like David Bowie. She studied theater and painting, but her heart was secretly married to music. Susanna was looking for something, a sound, a soul connection, maybe even a sisterhood. In 1981, fate intervened through a humble classified ad in the Recycler. The Peterson sisters were looking for a guitarist with strong harmonies and shared influences. Susanna responded. The first jam session was electric. Harmonies clicked into place like a musical jigsaw puzzle. Voices blended in that once-in-a-lifetime way, each unique, yet somehow meant to be together. They called themselves the Colors, then the Supersonic Bangs, before finally landing on the Bangles, a name that felt feminine, retro, and sharp-edged. With the addition of bassist Annette Zilinskas, the quartet had the final piece. They weren't just a band. They were a movement waiting to happen, echoing the past while carving out a bold, defiant future. In a scene still dominated by post-punk aggression and glam leftovers, the Bangles were different. And that difference? It was their secret weapon. But even when magic is undeniable, recognition doesn't come easy, especially for women daring to play rock on their own terms in the early 80s. The Bangles became staples in the Paisley Underground, a small but vibrant collective of Los Angeles bands inspired by psychedelic 60s music. This world wasn't polished or profitable, but it was real. Rehearsals happened in musty garages and borrowed spaces. They passed out their own flyers on Sunset Boulevard. Sometimes they played for 10 people, sometimes just the bartender. But they didn't care. The energy was electric. Their shows were tight, passionate, and soulful. The chemistry was visible, like 4 parts of the same heartbeat. And even then, there was that harmony, the kind that makes people pause mid-conversation just to listen. They quickly became darlings of the indie scene. But the industry? That was another story. Labels often praised their image but questioned their songwriting. Some asked if they were really playing their own instruments. Others wanted to package them, turn them into a novelty. "You need a lead singer," they were told. "Too many voices confuse the audience." But the band refused. They rotated lead vocals deliberately. They wanted balance. They wanted to be equals, something revolutionary in a world that was far more comfortable with hierarchy and control. Still, opportunity knocked. Their self-released 1982 EP, featuring tracks like The Real World, caught the attention of IRS Records, the same label that signed the Go-Go's. Their music video for The Real World, grainy and quirky, began making waves on early MTV rotations. Slowly, the tide was turning. Then, in a surprising twist, Annette Zilinskas decided to leave the group in 1983 to pursue her own musical path. It could have been a setback, but it became a blessing in disguise. Enter Michael Steele, former bassist for the Runaways. Michael was different, older, more experienced, and tough as nails. She brought a harder edge to their sound and depth to their arrangements. And despite early hesitation, she gelled with the group in a way no one expected. Her presence gave the band even more grit and emotional dimension. By 1984, the Bangles had released their full-length debut album, All Over the Place. It didn't storm the charts, but it was critically loved, especially the track Hero Takes a Fall. It showed the world their potential. They weren't just retro, they were refreshing, and they were just getting started. Then came the song that changed everything and nearly broke them apart. In 1985, as the Bangles were gaining traction, a mysterious offer arrived. A song gifted from a legend. Prince, yes, that Prince, had been quietly following the band's rise. According to insiders, he was captivated by their harmonies and especially taken with Susanna Hoffs. One night, using a pseudonym, Prince sent them a track he had written but never released, Manic Monday. It was charming, whimsical, and undeniably catchy, a dreamy pop tune wrapped in melancholy. The Bangles recorded it with their usual rotating vocal duties, but Susanna's soft, shimmering tone ultimately took the lead. And when the single dropped in early 1986, the world listened. Manic Monday shot up to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, right behind Prince's own Kiss. It was a surreal moment, their first major commercial hit, opening doors around the world. But with fame came fire. The media fixated on the Prince connection. Tabloids suggested that the song was a romantic gesture to Susanna. Some headlines went further, implying she was the chosen one or that the band was just her backing group. That wasn't just incorrect, it was deeply damaging. Inside the Bangles, there was no hierarchy. Every member wrote, every member sang, every member mattered. But the industry, hungry for a starlet to push, began painting Susanna as the focal point. Susanna herself felt the pressure. She was never trying to eclipse the band. But how do you stop a narrative once it takes hold? Tension brewed. Interviews became awkward. Creative decisions were questioned. And while they all remained professional, the emotional toll began to show. Still, they forged ahead, because if there was one thing the Bangles knew how to do, it was turn tension into art. Despite the building tension within the group, the momentum was unstoppable. The release of their second album, Different Light, in 1986, marked a new era for the Bangles. It was shinier, more radio-friendly, and refined, a deliberate evolution from their raw Paisley Underground roots. The label's influence was louder now, and the production leaned heavily into polished pop. Some longtime fans missed the edge of their earlier sound, but millions more were discovering them for the first time. And with that exposure came the explosion. If She Knew What She Wants was poetic and contemplative. Walking Down Your Street had a confident swagger, but then came Walk Like an Egyptian. It was weird, it was funky, it was pure 80s gold. Written by Liam Sternberg and initially offered to other artists, the song was an unexpected smash. With its tribal beat, playful lyrics, and whistle solo, Walk Like an Egyptian became a pop culture phenomenon, shooting to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and holding that spot for 4 weeks. The music video, full of kitschy dance moves and quirky city scenes, was in heavy rotation on MTV, cementing their status as global stars. For the first time, the Bangles were everywhere. Posters on bedroom walls, magazine covers, Top of the Pops in the UK. They were headlining world tours and inspiring a new generation of female musicians. And just when it seemed like they couldn't top themselves, they delivered a haunting, vulnerable masterpiece, Eternal Flame. Co-written by Susanna Hoffs, Tom Kelly, and Billy Steinberg, the track was the opposite of Walk Like an Egyptian. It was bare, intimate, and timeless, a love song drenched in longing. Susanna's vocals floated like a whispered prayer. There's even a story, half confirmed, that she sang the final take completely nude on a dare from the producer. Whether true or not, the emotion in her voice felt exposed, real, and unforgettable. The song soared to #1 across the globe, earning them their biggest hit yet. But with it came a harsh reality. The more successful they became, the more divided they felt. By the late 80s, the Bangles had it all: chart dominance, international fame, and a catalog of hits that spanned moods and genres. They weren't just a girl band anymore. They were the band of the moment. They played to sold-out arenas across Europe, Asia, and the U.S. fans screamed their names. Fashion magazines copied their looks. Teen girls formed bands just to be like them. They were, in many ways, redefining what women could be in rock. They weren't manufactured pop stars. They were songwriters, multi-instrumentalists, and live performers. Their influences ranged from garage rock to baroque pop to jangle folk, and they wore those influences proudly. But fame isn't just about songs and fans. Behind the scenes, the pressure to produce more, look perfect, and stay marketable became unbearable. Creative decisions were often driven by executives. Their image, once playful and authentic, began to feel more like a costume, and the media narratives hadn't stopped. Despite being a democracy on stage, interviews were increasingly centered on Susanna. Magazines referred to Susanna Hoffs and the Bangles. Some members reportedly requested not to appear in certain group photos because of how the framing made them look like backup musicians. The band was unraveling, not from failure, but from fame. In 1989, at the very top of their success, they made a radical decision. They walked away. No official farewell tour, no splashy announcement, just silence. Their fans were stunned. But for the women of the Bangles, the silence was a form of healing. The breakup hit each member differently, like a sudden stop after years of non-stop motion. Susanna Hoffs pursued a solo career. Her 1991 album, When You're a Boy, received modest success, but without her bandmates, the spotlight felt colder. She missed the harmonies, the camaraderie, the identity they had built together. Vicki Peterson, ever the songwriter, poured her energy into new projects, including a collaboration with the Continental Drifters. She also briefly toured with the Go-Go's, filling in after guitarist Charlotte Caffey stepped away. Debbie Peterson took time to focus on family life and formed a new group called Kindred Spirit, exploring a softer, more introspective side of her songwriting. Michael Steele, always the most reclusive of the four, pulled back from the music industry entirely. In interviews years later, she admitted to feeling disillusioned by the politics of fame, the image-focused game that seemed to matter more than the music. For years, there was no talk of reunion, no plans. The wounds ran too deep. But time, and love for the music, has a way of softening even the hardest edges. By the late 90s, something began to stir. The world had changed. The grunge wave had passed. Pop was surging again, and nostalgia for the 80s was creeping in. Bands from that golden era were reuniting, not for fame, but for joy, for legacy. In 1998, after nearly a decade apart, the core members of the Bangles came together to record a song for the Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me soundtrack. The energy was still there, the laughter, the rhythm, the magic. In 1999, they officially reunited, this time on their own terms. Gone were the managers who once steered the ship. Gone were the stylists who tried to mold them. What remained was sisterhood and a renewed commitment to the music that had brought them together in the first place. In 2003, they released Doll Revolution, a mature, introspective album that reflected both who they were and how far they'd come. It didn't top the charts, but it didn't need to. It was real. It was theirs. Since then, the Bangles have continued to tour, often playing festivals, benefits, and beloved live gigs that draw longtime fans and curious newcomers alike. They've shared stages with legends, been inducted into halls of fame, and seen their songs live on in films, commercials, and cover versions. In 2018, they even reunited with original bassist Annette Zilinskas, bringing the story full circle. It was a powerful moment of closure, a quiet celebration of the road they had walked. The Bangles never conformed to the industry mold, and in the end, that may be their greatest triumph. They were, and still are, a band of heart, harmony, and healing. The story of the Bangles isn't just about fame or success. It's about friendship, identity, and fighting to be heard in an industry that often tries to rewrite your story. They walked like Egyptians, they burned with eternal flame, and they survived the machine with their legacy still intact. Now we want to hear from you. What's your favorite Bangles song or memory? Were you there for their rise in the 80s? Or did you discover them later on a mixtape, in a movie, or through your parents' record collection? Let us know in the comments. Your stories matter here. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Retro Waves, and tap the bell so you never miss a story from the golden age of music. Because here on Retro Waves, legends live on.